Hello everyone! In this video, we'll walk you through the commercial and legal implications of the shareholder grouping rules, as well as how to set them up. So, what are shareholder grouping rules? Simply put, they allow different shareholders who have an affiliated relationship or are acting in concert to be labeled with the same shareholder group tag, so that their voting rights can be aggregated and calculated together. The main purpose of this rule is reflected in two aspects. First, when the system ranks shareholders by voting rights, it can aggregate the voting rights of affiliated shareholders and rank them as a single group. Second, when a vote is taking place, the system can quickly identify which shareholders have an affiliated relationship with the matter being voted on, and thus apply voting abstention rules to those shareholders. In our system, we use two T-shaped linked lists to store the voting rights of each shareholder. A T-shaped linked list means that there is a horizontally extending main chain as well as vertically extending branch chains. These downward vertical branch chains actually represent a group of shareholders with an affiliated relationship. For example, as you can see in this diagram, this downward extending branch chain means that the three nodes, the three shareholders represented by these nodes, have an affiliated relationship with each other. The topmost node, which connects both to the horizontal main chain and to the downward vertical branch chain, is the representative shareholder of this affiliated shareholder group. We can also call this the representative of the affiliated group. Now let's look at the top chain. If the total voting rights held by an affiliated shareholder group reach or exceed 5% of the total voting rights of the entire company, the system will place this group into the top chain, the upper linked list, and perform dynamic ranking of their voting rights. As we can see, the voting rights in this top chain are strictly ranked from highest to lowest. With this linked list structure, we can easily and clearly determine which shareholder is the de facto controlling shareholder and where each shareholder stands in the overall ranking of the shareholder composition. Now let's look at the bottom chain structure. Its overall structure is similar to the top chain, with one key difference. The bottom chain does not rank voting rights. So, as you can see, some shareholders may have 20 million votes, some 25 million, some 22 million. They are simply added and removed in sequential order, like a queue. There is no dynamic real-time ranking of voting rights. Therefore, once we have effectively labeled these affiliated shareholders, the system can automatically complete dynamic voting rights ranking. It's worth noting that the 5% threshold we just mentioned is a number that shareholders can define themselves in the general corporate governance rules of the shareholder agreement. We used 5% as an example because, under relevant securities laws in both China and the United States, any shareholder who acquires 5% or more of a public company's shares through secondary market purchases must report this to the relevant securities regulatory authority. Of course, shareholders can absolutely change this 5% to another number in their shareholder agreement. Now, let's jump back to the ComBoox system and see how to set up these shareholder grouping rules. We click the Grouping Orders button to go to the user interface. This interface is very similar to the voting rules or position allocation rules we introduced earlier. It is an interface that allows us to dynamically add or remove grouping rules to or from the shareholder agreement draft. If we click the plus button, we can add a new shareholder grouping rule. If we click the minus button, we can delete the last rule in the grouping rules from the current panel and also from the draft. It's worth noting that deleting from the draft essentially means deleting it from the smart contract. Now, let's click on the first rule, rule number 768. Rule number 768 is the very first rule in this subcategory. During the activation process of the shareholder agreement, this first rule will be read first by the system. Based on its attributes, the system will determine how many grouping rules have been entered into the smart contract draft. Then, the system will read each of those grouping rules into the corresponding functions for subsequent calculations, and then update the shareholder register or other relevant information stored in the system. The first attribute is the quantities of subsidiary rules. This indicates how many shareholder grouping rules are included in this subcategory. As we just mentioned, this is the parameter the system uses to determine how many rules have been added to this subcategory. the system will automatically read the relevant rules based on this value. The second attribute is add member. This indicates whether we are adding a new member to a small set of affiliated shareholder groups. If we select true, that means we want to add a new member to an affiliated group. If we select false, that means we want to remove an existing member from an existing group. The next attribute is group rep, short for group representative. This refers to the user ID of the representative of a small affiliated shareholder group. It essentially represents the user ID of a shareholder, specifically the node we showed you earlier in the T-shaped linked list, the node that connects both to the horizontally extending main chain and to the downward extending branch chain. We can also call this the fork node. This fork node is, in the system, the representative shareholder of an affiliated shareholder group. Its role is very important because it carries a special cumulative voting rights value, the sum value, which represents the total voting rights of all shareholders in the entire affiliated group. Our system frequently uses this cumulative sum value in relevant calculations. Next, there are 4 fields for entering member user IDs, labeled Member 1 through Member 4. If we want to add new shareholders to a particular interested party shareholder group, we would fill in the user IDs of these new shareholders into these 4 fields in order, as you can see, using this structure to store shareholder grouping rules, or we can call them shareholder grouping commands, allows for virtually unlimited expansion. For example, we could delete the first, second, third, and fourth affiliated shareholders in one rule, and then delete the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th shareholders in the next rule, and so on. This is entirely achievable. One important concept to clarify: how does the system identify or name a particular group? The answer is based on the user ID of the representative shareholder. In other words, when we refer to a specific affiliated group, say group number 4, that actually means the affiliated group represented by the shareholder with user ID 4. That group includes not only the shareholder with user ID 4, but also other shareholders, such as user ID 6, and so on. So, every time we name such a group, we are essentially naming it by the user ID of the representative shareholder of that affiliated group. That's all for today. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you in the next video.